On Saturday the 4th of October, just earlier this month, a 23-year-old woman named Kada Scott reported for her overnight shift at a senior living facility in Chestnut Hill, Philadelphia, on what was seemingly just an ordinary evening. But at some point during her shift, Kada mysteriously walked out of the building and hasn't been seen since. At first, her family thought she might have just needed a break or gone to clear her head, but when hours turned into days with no word, that initial concern quickly turned into fear. After being reported missing, investigators discovered her car still parked outside her workplace, with no surveillance footage to reveal where she had gone. But to make the situation even more concerning, police would soon learn that in the days leading up to her disappearance, Kada had been receiving harassing phone calls from someone she didn't know. So in response, they performed a large-scale search at Aubrey Arboretum, a wooded area located just a few miles away. Canine units, drones, and dozens of officers then combed through the grounds, eventually leading them to an abandoned school in Germantown, where they would recover a series of items that belonged to Kada, as well as a vehicle linked to her disappearance. In response, homicide detectives were brought onto the case, and a man named Keon King was promptly arrested in relation to Kada's disappearance, leading her family to fear the worst. However, despite these recent updates, the case still remains unsolved after 2 weeks, understandably leaving her family in a state of unease as they continue to ask the same haunting question: what really happened to Kada Scott? And if she didn't leave on her own, then who could be responsible? Kada Scott was born in the early 2000s and raised in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, by a family that prided itself on love, faith, and perseverance. She grew up in a home where education and compassion were deeply valued, lessons that would follow her well into adulthood. Those who knew Kada describe her as ambitious, warm-hearted, and fiercely driven, a young woman who didn't just dream about her goals, but worked tirelessly to make them happen. Her family say she was the kind of daughter who always checked in, who never missed a birthday call or a family gathering. Her friends describe her as someone who could light up any room, with a laugh that was instantly recognizable and an energy that made people feel seen and valued. Growing up in the city, Kada learned early on how to balance independence with responsibility. She was social and confident, but she also had a deeply caring side, often volunteering in her community and offering words of encouragement to anyone going through a tough time. After graduating high school, Kada went on to attend Penn State University, where she earned her degree and began building what seemed to be a bright future. She was passionate about content creation, entrepreneurship, and fashion, and had begun cultivating a presence online as a social media influencer. In the summer before her disappearance, she even competed in the Miss Pennsylvania USA pageant, an experience she proudly shared with her followers. But behind her creative ambitions, Kada also worked hard to stay grounded. She took on an overnight job at a nursing home in northwest Philadelphia where she cared for elderly residents, a job that spoke to her nurturing and responsible nature. Her mother often said that Kada never did anything halfway. Whether it was helping a patient, editing a video, or supporting a friend, she always gave it her all. To her loved ones, she has always been dependable, motivated, and full of life. She doesn't have a history of disappearing, running away, or cutting off contact. If anything, she is the type of person that people lean on, someone who always seemed to have everything under control. However, just as her life was beginning to take off, an event would suddenly take place that would leave everyone who knew her completely stunned, when she would mysteriously disappear on that fateful night in October. On Saturday the 4th of October, the 23-year-old started her day like any other, balancing her content creation work and her budding facial spa business while she mentally prepared for her night shift at the nursing home. In the previous days, Kada had mentioned receiving a series of strange, harassing phone calls from an unknown number, which were calls that made her feel uneasy to say the least. She reportedly told both friends and family that the voice on the other end belonged to a man, or possibly more than one person, but she didn't recognize who they were. However, despite the unsettling nature of those calls, Kada didn't seem overly frightened. She brushed it off, choosing instead to focus on her career. That evening, she spoke briefly with her mother, as she often did before leaving for her overnight shift. According to her family, nothing seemed unusual. Kada appeared calm, composed, and ready for work. The nursing home she worked at wasn't too far away from where she lived, so at around 9:50 p.m, she left home wearing her work uniform, got into her car, and drove the short distance to the facility in Chestnut Hill, where her shift was scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock and end at 6 a.m. the next morning. Kada arrived at the senior home on time and was seen entering the building, but sometime shortly after her arrival, she spontaneously decided to leave the facility before her shift was over. She didn't tell anyone she was leaving, and there was no indication of distress or confrontation prior to her departure. But making matters even worse, the nursing home had no security cameras by the exit or the parking lot to capture her movements, so it can only be assumed that she left sometime around 10:30 p.m. As the hours ticked by, her colleagues began to notice her absence, hoping that she would soon return to the facility to continue her shift. But by the next morning, she had not only failed to return to work, but she had also failed to return home, at which point her family started to grow concerned. At first, they wondered if she might have just stayed with a friend or taken some time to clear her head, but as the hours continued to pass, with Kada refusing to answer her phone or respond to any messages, that hope began to fade. So, realizing that something was terribly wrong, Kada's family decided they had no other option but to contact the Philadelphia Police Department to officially report her as missing. On Monday the 6th of October, nearly 2 days after 23-year-old Kada Scott was last seen, the Philadelphia Police Department would receive that harrowing phone call from her family, a call that no parent ever wants to make. They explained that their daughter hadn't come home after her Saturday night shift, and that all attempts to reach her had failed. Her phone was going straight to voicemail, her social media had gone silent, and for someone as active and family-oriented as Kada, that silence was deafening. Those who knew her best said the same thing. This just wasn't like her. She was a creature of habit, always checking in, always keeping her loved ones updated on where she was and when she'd be home. She wasn't the type to just disappear, not for an hour, let alone an entire weekend. But despite learning these concerning details, at first, officers handled the case with cautious optimism, as they often do with missing adults. There was hope that maybe Kada had just needed space, that she'd turned off her phone and was staying somewhere safe with a friend. But her family pushed back on that idea, as they knew Kada and they knew something was seriously wrong. Her mother told detectives that she had last spoken to her daughter when she left for work on Saturday night, calm and collected with no signs of distress. Her friends echoed that, describing her as upbeat and focused just days before she vanished. But still, the first 24 hours after the report brought little movement. Detectives reached out to Kada's workplace and confirmed she had shown up that night, but that she hadn't completed her shift. So, eventually realizing that the case may be more complicated than first thought, the police began retracing her steps, calling co-workers, checking nearby businesses for any surveillance footage, and combing through her digital footprint. But there appeared to be no activity on her accounts and no pings from her phone. It was as though Kada had simply vanished into thin air. However, as officers continued gathering details, one of the first major developments came from the senior living facility itself, as when investigators arrived on site to begin their preliminary search, they discovered something that immediately deepened the mystery. Kada's car was still sitting in the parking lot, exactly where she had left it on Saturday night. But inside, there were no keys, no phone, and no sign of Kada anywhere. So as detectives surveyed the quiet, dimly lit parking lot, one haunting question began to take shape. On Friday the 10th of October, nearly a week after Kada Scott had last been seen, Philadelphia authorities escalated their search efforts, determined to uncover any clue that might explain her sudden disappearance. The discovery of her car had surprisingly led to no new leads, so in response, investigators began canvassing the neighborhood by speaking with neighbors and anyone who might have seen her that night. As the days passed, the search expanded to include canine units and ground teams, scouring areas within walking distance of the Chestnut Hill senior living facility. One significant focus was the Aubrey Arboretum, a vast green space about an hour's walk from where Kada had last been seen. Police indicated that tips and evidence collected from interviews with friends, family and witnesses had led them to this location, though the specifics were not publicly disclosed. The Arboretum search involved hundreds of personnel, including the FBI, Philadelphia police officers, and volunteers. Drones scanned wooded areas and trails, while ground teams checked every potential hiding spot. During the search, authorities reportedly recovered clothing items, though it remained unclear whether they were connected to Kada. At the same time, detectives were examining digital evidence, including her phone records, social media activity, and messages. Investigators noted that in the days before her disappearance, Kada had been receiving harassing phone calls from an unknown person or group of people, a detail that heightened concern and suggested her disappearance could involve foul play. Meanwhile, friends, family, and the Philadelphia community rallied to assist. Flyers with her photo were distributed, social media campaigns amplified her story, and volunteers searched streets, parks, and other public areas for any trace of her. However, despite these initial extensive efforts, no confirmed sighting of Kada Scott would emerge, leaving her loved ones and investigators desperate for answers. But refusing to give up, further evidence would eventually come forward. On Wednesday, the 15th of October, exactly 11 days after Kada Scott had vanished, the investigation into her disappearance took a dramatic turn. That afternoon, Chopper 6 captured a swarm of police activity above the Gypsy Lane condos in Philadelphia, where officers had cordoned off a parking lot surrounding a 1999 metallic gold Toyota Camry, a car that matched the exact description and license plate linked to Kada's case. Authorities say they were led to the location by a tip received around 3:10 p.m, and upon arrival immediately confirmed that the vehicle was connected to the ongoing investigation. The car reportedly had heavy front-end damage and tinted windows, and was quickly impounded to be searched once a warrant was approved, but that wasn't the only major discovery made that day. Earlier in the morning, police had deployed drones and canine units to search an abandoned elementary school near the Aubrey Arboretum in Germantown, the very same area where investigators had focused part of their search the previous week. According to law enforcement sources, officers discovered physical evidence at the scene, including Kada's work ID card and a phone case, both of which were confirmed to belong to her. Philadelphia Police Sergeant Eric Grip described the findings as very substantial, confirming that the items directly tied Kada to that location. But by the evening, the case would take yet another turn, when authorities announced the arrest of 21-year-old Keon King of Southwest Philadelphia, who they now believe was the last person in contact with Kada before she disappeared. Keon had been formally charged with kidnapping, recklessly endangering another person, and use of a communication facility, though investigators would stress that the search for Kada remained active. Deputy Commissioner Frank Van Orr would also reveal that evidence seemed to show Kada had been in communication with King in the days leading up to her disappearance, where he was quoted as saying, "Our evidence is pretty clear that she was in contact with this individual. He appears to have met her very shortly after she left work, and very shortly after that, she disappears." Detectives also confirmed that the gold Toyota Camry, which police believe belongs to the suspect, had been seen in multiple neighborhoods across Philadelphia, including Mount Airy, Center City, Grays Ferry, and Southwest Philadelphia, before being found at the condo complex. Surveillance footage reportedly shows the driver leaving the property roughly 35 minutes after arriving, but it's still unclear who was behind the wheel at the time. Even more disturbing, prosecutors revealed that King has a history of similar behavior. The assistant district attorney stated that he is also connected to a prior kidnapping and strangulation case from earlier in 2025, one that was dropped only because the victim did not appear in court. That case is now being refiled, meaning King will soon face 2 open kidnapping cases. Police also confirmed that Kada had reported being harassed before her disappearance, though it remains unclear whether King was the individual involved. Despite the arrest, however, officials emphasise that the case is still far from over. As Deputy Commissioner Van Orr explained, they are treating this as if Miss Scott is still alive. Homicide investigators have since joined the case, not because foul play has been confirmed, but because they bring the most experienced resources to handle complex, high-risk investigations like this one. Meanwhile, Kada's family continues to plead with the public for help, urging anyone with information to contact police. Her father, Kevin Scott, shared an emotional statement. "You never know what little, small, minuscule information may apply to the big picture, the puzzle that might get Kada home." So as the search stretches into its second week, the questions have only grown darker and the discoveries more unsettling. Because now, with a suspect in custody, physical evidence recovered, and a vehicle tied to multiple neighbourhoods, we're once again only left to wonder, what really happened to Kada Scott? And if she didn't leave on her own, then what was the plan that led to her disappearance? Now, unfortunately, as far as the official investigation goes, this is all we know for now. But thanks to the tireless efforts of Kada Scott's family, friends, and the Philadelphia community, her story continues to gain more attention, both locally and beyond. Social media campaigns, neighbourhood searches, and volunteer-led efforts have ensured that she is not forgotten, keeping her case active and very much in the public eye. So with this in mind, we have to remain hopeful that sooner or later someone will come forward with the information needed to uncover the truth, and finally give her family the answers that they've been desperately seeking. However, given that Kada has now been missing for almost 2 weeks, alongside the fact that a suspect has been arrested in conjunction with homicide detectives, I can't help but feel that the likelihood of her safe return is only growing weaker as the days pass. So with that, let's get into some of the potential theories. Now, as always, just before we get into the theories themselves, I feel it's important to acknowledge the immense pain and uncertainty that Kada's family have been forced to endure during this difficult period. So out of respect for them, I will approach these possibilities with as much sensitivity as possible, and I will only be covering ideas that stem from statements made by the family or information released by law enforcement. Also, while some theories may appear more likely than others, we must remember that until concrete evidence emerges, they remain nothing more than speculation. So with this in mind, one of the leading theories in Kada Scott's disappearance is that she was lured or coerced into a dangerous situation by someone she knew or trusted. This theory doesn't assume that Kada was aware she was in danger. In fact, many close to her believe the exact opposite, that her disappearance began with what seemed like a normal, even familiar interaction. We now know from police statements that Kada had been in contact with a man named Keon King in the days leading up to her disappearance. Investigators believe that he met her very shortly after she left work on the night of October 4th, and not long after that, she vanished. Authorities also confirmed that Keon King has since been arrested and charged with kidnapping and reckless endangerment, and that physical evidence linking Kada to a search site near the Aubrey Arboretum was recently discovered, which includes her ID card and phone case. So this timeline has led many to believe that whatever happened to Kada was not random, but deliberate, and potentially even planned out. Before her disappearance, Kada had reported being harassed, though investigators have not yet said whether those reports were connected to Keon King. But still, it raises an unsettling question. Could he have been the person behind those calls? And was this part of a pattern of manipulation or intimidation? Police now say that Kada's car remained parked in her workplace parking lot, but King's vehicle, a gold 1999 Toyota Camry, was found days later at a condo complex in Philadelphia. So investigators believe that she may have been inside that very car, and surveillance footage shows the vehicle leaving the property roughly 35 minutes after it arrived. For many following the case, these details suggest that Kada may have willingly entered the car of someone she didn't initially fear, possibly believing she was safe, only for that trust to be exploited. And tragically, it wouldn't be the first time something like this has happened. Prosecutors revealed that King has a prior record, including an earlier kidnapping and strangulation case from 2025, a chilling revelation that adds a darker weight to the theory of premeditated foul play. So, as painful as it is to consider, the evidence increasingly points toward the possibility that Kada's disappearance was not a spontaneous event, but one that may have been planned and carried out by someone she knew. But even with all of the evidence that has been brought forward by the investigators, there is still one haunting question which remains. If the person responsible is already in custody, then where is Kada? Well, as difficult as it is to consider, another theory that has been raised by those following Kada Scott's disappearance is the possibility that she may have fallen victim to human trafficking, an issue that tragically affects thousands across the United States every year, including the state of Pennsylvania. Human trafficking, especially involving younger women, remains a hidden but very real threat. Traffickers often exploit vulnerabilities, stress, uncertainty, or a sudden change in circumstances to coerce or manipulate victims into forced labour, sexual exploitation, or other forms of control. If Kada was in a moment of vulnerability and decided to get in a car with a stranger or even someone she thought she could trust, she may have been targeted by someone skilled at deception who used false promises of safety, opportunity, or familiarity to lure her into a dangerous situation. Family and friends have described Kada as responsible, independent, and highly grounded. She was active on social media, ambitious in her entrepreneurial pursuits, and deeply connected to her family. These traits make it hard to imagine her willingly vanishing without explanation. Yet tragically, traffickers often prey on even the most careful and conscientious individuals, exploiting brief lapses in safety or trust. Adding to this concern, Kada's phone and keys went missing shortly after she left work, and her car remained parked in the facility. There has been no activity on her devices and no social media updates, so this sudden disappearance fits patterns often seen in trafficking cases, where victims are quickly removed from public view and are unable to reach out for help. While there is currently no direct evidence confirming that human trafficking is involved in Kada's case, the reality is that traffickers often operate in the shadows, taking advantage of gaps in law enforcement and community awareness. Experts emphasize that even a short window of vulnerability can be enough for traffickers to act, which is why early attention and thorough investigation is always critical. Now, I want to be clear, this is not a definitive statement about what happened to Kada. However, given the circumstances of her disappearance, it's a possibility that I feel cannot be ignored, especially since she is still yet to be found. Authorities need to continue exploring every angle, including this one, as it may hold clues to her whereabouts and safety. So, with all of this troubling information in mind, it's crucial that we continue spreading awareness, supporting search efforts, and hoping that law enforcement can uncover the information needed to bring Kada safely back home to her family. Anyway, on that note, I think I'll leave this video here. But as always, if you have any other theories of your own which you think may help explain what really happened to Kada Scott, then please leave your ideas in the comments down below and I'll do my best to get back to you. But until next time, thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe to the channel for updates on these stories. Also, if you found this video interesting, feel free to check out the playlist on screen now, which covers the many other cases of young women who continue to disappear across America, never to be seen alive again.